back maybe a half dozen years ago, the Seattle area was debating what was going to happen with the Alaskan Way Viaduct. They had a line on some money. They had a commitment to how funded. It needed to be dealt with. What was going to happen? It's a state road. Became Washington State Department of Transportation taking the lead on the project. And when Seattle embarked on this journey of trying to discover what to do with the Alaskan Way Viaduct, they hired a bunch of consultants. The consultants were hired by WashDOT, so the consultants did what WashDOT wanted them to do. And these are architects and engineers. This was the team of people that was assembled to do the job. And they did immediately what you would expect engineers to do. They focused on things like tunnels and big viaducts. In the midst of doing that, there was this notion called an integrated elevated alternative. And the thought was that somehow you could take an elevated structure and somehow fit it into the urban landscape so it kind of fit, kind of became part of the community, part of the city. Well, they didn't know how to deal with that. So the project continued year after year after year with this idea, and they couldn't define it. Might it be possible to integrate an elevated roadway into Seattle's waterfront? That was the mission. So, is this going to fit in Seattle? Is this thing with a lid on top, a roadway inside, a bunch of people, and local street activity going to work on the ground level? This is what we had to work with. We had a zone near the water's edge that needed to be pedestrian. It needed to be a grand place for people to promenade. We had the need to serve these buildings that were opposite the Alaskan Way Viaduct. What we ended up with is a space, next slide, which was an envelope that it might make sense to replace the viaduct with something that integrated into the urban environment. Next. We're waiting for the Seattle waterfront to slough away. So, part of the constraint was dealing with this old embankment and the need to replace that seawall. Anyway, it was somewhat of a complicated exercise from a land terra firma point of view. Next slide. And so we quickly said, okay, what do we have that we work with? We have the need for 2 lanes. This is an odd collection of sketches, so they're random and don't follow the process we went through. 1 level roadway, a lid on top where people could enjoy the views. That lid, incidentally, when you brought it from the market down to the stadium district and include the pedestrian edge along the waterfront, would be more than 1 million square feet of public space. Huge. A ground level that we wanted the roadway to be high enough so that you could get 2 levels of activity in there. And then a pedestrian promenade. And there was always the cry for more parking, so we were considering using what they have to excavate anyway to do the pile caps as a place for parking. We had to phase it. So here's where the technology, the roadway, starts to get in the way with what you're trying to do from an urban design point of view. That had to be done before that could be taken out. Next. You've got relationships there that are rather physical. So that, just to give, next slide, to give you an idea of what we were dealing with, there were some real hard technical constraints to come up with something that worked well. We said, okay, let's think big, let's turn this into a mixed-use place and think grand. And you do that as a teaser to the audience. You do this sort of thing so that you don't get somebody coming back later and say, well, why didn't you? So what you quickly determine by doing these sort of sketches is what the community is willing to support. Oftentimes you do things that you don't want to do just to tease out that reaction. So anyway, sketch like this. Next. Eventually it ended up settling down to this cross-section. A shop, couple levels, tight, the roadway. Next. And we knew there were decades of aspirations associated with turning the waterfront into a spectacular public space. So we had all this stuff that everybody expected that this integrated, elevated fulfill. Next. We had view corridors. What we came to realize, which if you're going to play with this is very important, is when you're down low, maybe the viaduct pokes above the wharfs. Remember, the wharfs are skewed, they're at an angle, so you really don't see the waterfront on these view corridors until whatever is there gets above these wharfs. As you get closer, then the wharfs become the dominant thing, not the viaduct. And as you get up to 4th, it's meaningless. It does not have any impact whatsoever on the view corridor. So where I was hearing noises from the community of architects and urban designers that you can't block the view corridors, right, nobody wants to do that, but it's still possible to do this without blocking the view corridors, if it's carefully handled, is what I discussed next. So we ended up doing a series of quick sketches to model this. This is the block, the green roof, something light that spans the streets so that you don't take away that largely perceived notion of a view corridor, and a ground level that's activated like most waterfronts. A wide promenade roadway to serve the local community and shops. Next. And then we said, okay, this green platform that is this park, it wants to meld back into the city. It wants to connect to the city. Much like if you've ever been to Lisbon, it's got the higher residential areas, and you take these little bridges out, you've got these beautiful elevator towers. What you do is you then connect the green platform back into the city. There's a lot of redevelopment potential between Alaskan Way and downtown that you could do this too. And that I thought was really exciting. Next. So then we said, okay, we got to get hard. We're working for a bunch of engineers, and we've got to do simulations. And this was back when simulations were kind of a new thing, so they were kind of crude, but the notion was a large landscape, street, the shops. This was then kind of taking on the Singaporean model of an arcade. You walk under the edge, inside, up over, you wrap the roadway with a glass skin. You've used sound-absorbing pavements, and you have a continuous structure on the roadway, so you don't have that clink, 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 clink every time it passes an expansion joint. And that roadway in that configuration would be quieter than a city street. So we were confident that the noise issue was not an issue. And we climbed up over, we begin to see the relationship of this object to the waterfront, which then became this wonderful pedestrian experience, or green roof on top of the freeway next. But we knew we were fighting a problem uphill as we created a bit of a canyon between the existing structures and the eastern edge of the viaduct. Next. And we always had the problem of dealing with the perception that we were blocking views. So we played around with different ways to try to make as transparent as possible where the roadway cut through the east-west streets. And that really was kind of a nice thing to do, because it had forced us from this long linear thing to a series of city blocks, so that the architecture of each block could be much more responsive to the immediate context of the area, and not be this homogeneous structure that essentially would be a repeat of the homogeneous linear structure that is this current structure out there. So we like that. We ended up liking that. Waterfronts are only successful if people feel that they are part of a civic, promenading, festive, fun place. What I desperately worry about the current design is it's too damn wide. It's anonymous. So every successful, and this is foreshortened this way, which is unfortunate, but every successful waterfront that's truly devoted to the pedestrian, that distance is 40 to 60 feet. It's never really more than that. If it is, then people will take their picnic basket out and treat it more as a rural setting, not an urban setting. Walk around the world and look at different waterfronts. Beautiful when they're pastoral and people can go out and have a picnic lunch, but successful urban waterfronts, they become successful from a pedestrian point of view when they're active, vibrant, festive, fun places to be. So we were playing with a lot of different images from a lot of different places. Like I said,